The Desperate Alliance. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Concordat hummed with anxious energy. 500 species represented, 500 voices raised in a cacophony of fear. Ambassador Ilara Voss watched from her elevated platform as the chamber descended into chaos. Their perfect society, built on consensus and cooperation over 12 millennia, was facing extinction. Order. I demand order. High Chancellor Zilnax's voice boomed through the amplification system, their translucent tentacles rippling with stress chromatics. The chamber quieted, but the fear remained palpable. The Void Harbingers have consumed the Pelmari system, Zilnax continued, their voice quavering. 17 billion souls. Gone. This makes the 12th system lost in 60 rotations. Ilara studied the holographic display at the chamber center, showing the advancing darkness. Not ships, not creatures, just absence. Where the Harbingers passed, reality simply ceased to exist. Our best scientists have no explanation. Science Director Melbra acknowledged, their crystalline form reflecting the chamber's anxious lights. Our defense systems are ineffective. At current expansion rates, the Void Harbingers will reach our core worlds within 38 rotations. The crowd erupted again. Species that had never known true existential threat now faced oblivion. The Concordat had evolved in peace, gentle herbivores and filter feeders from temperate worlds with minimal predation pressure. Violence was foreign to them, warfare an ancient memory. Ilara felt something the others didn't. Determination. Unlike her peers, she had spent decades studying the quarantined species from the Forbidden Sector, the Deathworlders. Humans. High Chancellor, she called, standing tall on her forelegs. I request emergency speaking privileges. The chamber quieted as Zilnax acknowledged her. Ambassador Voss has the floor. Honorable representatives, Ilara began, her voice steady. For 12,000 years, our Concordat has prospered through cooperation and peace. We have created wonders, cured diseases, eliminated hunger, mastered faster than light travel. But we have also forgotten something vital. She gestured to the darkness consuming the hologram. We have forgotten how to fight, how to survive at any cost, how to face extinction and refuse it. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. There is a species that hasn't forgotten, she continued. A species quarantined because we feared their nature. A species that evolved on a world so hostile that simply surviving meant constant warfare against their environment, against predators, and against themselves. You can't possibly mean, Zilnax began. I mean humans, Ilara confirmed. The Deathworlders. The chamber erupted into horrified exclamations. Ilara had expected this. The quarantine of Earth had been established over 70 years earlier, when first contact revealed a species unlike any in the Concordat. Humans had evolved on a heavy gravity world with toxic oxygen levels, extreme temperature variations, and relentless predation. Their bodies were dense with muscle and bone, their reflexes unnaturally quick, their minds adapted to see threats everywhere. Worse, they had spent their entire history fighting. Their technological development had been driven primarily by warfare. When Concordat observers first arrived, humans had already developed weapons capable of destroying their own planet, not as a tragic accident, but on purpose. The quarantine exists for good reason. Security Commissioner Drelb objected. Have you seen their history? Their entertainment? They simulate violence for pleasure. They designed weapons specifically to destroy one another. Yes, Ilara agreed calmly. And that is precisely why we need them now. She activated her personal datapad, and a holographic display shifted to show classified human military files, files she wasn't supposed to have access to. During our brief cultural exchange before the quarantine, our observers documented human military capabilities, she explained. In the 70 years since isolation, we've maintained minimal monitoring. What we've observed is concerning. The display showed massive warships bristling with weapon systems the Concordat's brightest minds couldn't even identify. That, Ilara said, pointing to the largest vessel, is what they call a planet killer, and they have built dozens of them. Silence fell as the implications sank in. You're proposing we invite these predators into our space? Zilnax asked, tentacles pale with horror. These beings who view warfare as natural as breathing. I'm proposing, Ilara replied, that we ask the only species in known space who understands extinction-level threats and refuses to accept them to help us survive one. After 3 days of bitter debate, the Council narrowly approved Ilara's proposal. She was assigned to lead a diplomatic mission to the human quarantine border with a small delegation representing the Concordats' leadership. Their ship, the Harmony, was the fastest diplomatic vessel in the fleet, yet still designed for comfort rather than speed. It would take 14 rotations to reach the border. 14 rotations during which 2 more systems fell to the Void Harbingers. Ambassador, Science Director Melbora approached as Ilara studied the latest intelligence reports in her quarters. I've been analyzing the Harbinger expansion patterns. They're accelerating. Ilara's secondary heart fluttered with anxiety. By how much? At current rates, core worlds will be reached in 26 rotations, not 38. Ilara closed her eyes briefly. Then we must hope the humans are as formidable as we fear. When they finally reached the quarantine border, a vast network of automated beacons warning away all Concordat vessels, Ilara sent the emergency contact signal on all frequencies. 6 hours later, a human vessel appeared. Not through the established jump point, but simply there. One moment empty space, the next a sleek black warship that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Impossible, gasped Navigator Pelrith. They can't have jumped that close to our position. The energy requirements. Ambassador Voss, a voice came through their communication system, speaking flawless Concordat standard. This is Captain Maya Rise of the United Earth Defense Force vessel Nemesis. You violated quarantine protocols. Explain yourself. Ilara stepped forward. Captain Rise, I represent the Galactic Concordat. We face extinction and request immediate audience to discuss assistance. A pause. Transmit your data. All of it. Ilara sent the complete file on the Void Harbingers. Every scan, every recording, every analysis. For several minutes, there was silence. Ambassador, request permission to board your vessel with a small delegation. Captain Rice finally responded. Granted, Ilara said, ignoring the nervous looks from her colleagues. 20 minutes later, the airlock cycled, and Captain Maya Rice strode onto the Harmony's bridge. The humans, 4 of them, were terrifying up close. Even the smallest towered over Ilara, their dense musculature visible even through their sleek black uniforms. They moved with predatory grace, eyes constantly evaluating, assessing. Captain Rice was clearly the alpha predator. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, highlighting sharp facial features and piercing eyes that seemed to see through Ilara's exoskeleton to the vulnerable organs beneath. Ambassador, Rice said, inclining her head slightly. You've got our attention. Ilara gestured to the briefing table. We've prepared full tactical and scientific briefings. I've reviewed your data, Rice interrupted. These harbingers consume space-time itself and leave nothing behind. You've lost 14 systems in 60 days. Your defensive capabilities are non-existent. Your weapons wouldn't even register as weapons to us. She paused. And after 70 years of quarantining humanity as too dangerous to join your galactic community, you now want our help. The humans' directness was jarring. In Concordat diplomacy, such bluntness would be unconscionable. Yes, Ilara said simply. We need your help. Rice studied her thoughtfully. Why should humanity risk itself for the same organization that decided we were too violent to associate with? The question hung in the air. The other diplomats shifted uncomfortably, at a loss for how to respond to such directness. Because you can, Ilara replied. Because you're the only ones who can. And because I believe humans define themselves not just by their capacity for violence, but by their choice of when to use it. Something changed in Raya's expression, a subtle shift Ilara couldn't quite interpret. "Well said, Ambassador." She tapped a device on her wrist. "I'm authorized to offer conditional assistance, pending full strategic assessment." Relief flooded Ilara's system. "Thank you, Captain." "Don't thank me yet," Rise replied grimly. "My orders are to evaluate whether this threat warrants deploying the Extinction Shield Protocol." She looked directly at Ilara. "That's our term for bringing our most lethal ships and weapons to bear." Science Director Melber's crystalline form paled. "Most lethal? You mean you have ships more powerful than the ones we observed?" A cold smile touched Raya's lips. "Ambassador, what your species observed 70 years ago were our exploratory vessels. What you've been monitoring since are our patrol ships." She gestured, and a holographic display activated, showing massive vessels that dwarfed any Concordat ship. "These are our warships, and they're already mobilizing." Operation Extinction Shield. The arrival of the human battle fleet at Meridian Station caused panic throughout the Concordat. Despite Ilara's warnings and briefings, nothing could have prepared her people for the reality of human military might. The diplomatic vessel Harmony seemed like a child's toy next to the massive human warships. At the center of the formation, the UED of Apocalypse hung in space like a dark promise. 12 kilometers of matte black hull, bristling with weapon systems that the Concordat's finest minds couldn't even identify. Surrounding it were 26 planet killers, each capable of reducing a world to atoms. And that was just the vanguard. "How many vessels?" High Chancellor Zilnax asked, their voice barely a whisper as they stared at the tactical display in Meridian Station's command center. 317 combat vessels in the initial deployment," Admiral Kazuo Chen answered. The human stood with perfect military posture, seemingly unaware of the terror his mere presence caused among the Concordat representatives. "The main battle group will arrive within 4 days." Main battle group. Security Commissioner Drelb's translator unit struggled to convey his horror. "You mean this isn't your primary force?" Admiral Chen looked confused by the question. "Of course not. This is just the Rapid Response Fleet. Operation Extinction Shield calls for full deployment of the 3rd, 5th, and 7th Battle Fleets, along with support elements, approximately 2,000 combat vessels." The room fell silent. 2,000. Zilnax repeated. "The entire Concordat has only 400 vessels total, and most of those are scientific or diplomatic." Chen nodded. "We're aware of your defensive limitations. That's why we've established a perimeter 10 light-years from your core systems. No Concordat vessels will be permitted beyond that line. This is now a military operation." Ilara watched the Concordat leadership struggle with this fundamental shift. For 12 millennia, their society had operated through consensus and cooperation. The concept of a military chain of command was profoundly alien. "Admiral," she said, stepping forward, "perhaps I could help explain our strategic approach to the Council." Chen seemed to assess her, then nodded sharply. "Proceed, Ambassador. You've shown remarkable understanding of human tactical thinking." Ilara activated the main display, showing the approaching Void Harbingers. The human strategy operates on 3 phases. First, containment, stopping the Harbingers' advance using a defensive line of specialized vessels called Void Anchors. Second, intelligence gathering, learning what the Harbingers are and how they can be destroyed. Third, elimination. And how exactly do you plan to eliminate something that consumes reality itself? Science Director Melber asked. From the doorway, a new voice answered, "By giving it something it can't digest." Captain Maya Rise entered, accompanied by a human woman in a laboratory coat rather than a military uniform. Her red hair was tied back, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. "This is Dr. Samantha Winters, our Chief Science Officer," Rise introduced her. "She's developed a theoretical approach to the Harbingers." Dr. Winters stepped forward. "Based on your data, these Harbingers consume space-time itself, converting matter and energy into nothing. But everything in physics has limits. We believe we can overload their consumption capacity. She gestured, and the display showed a massive vessel unlike the others, spherical rather than angular, with a strange distortion effect surrounding it. This is the UEDF Event Horizon. It carries what we call a false vacuum initiator, essentially a device that can create a localized bubble of altered physical laws. The Concordat scientists stared in disbelief. "You can change the laws of physics?" Melbra asked, their voice dropping to a reverential whisper. "Temporarily and locally, yes," Dr. Winters confirmed. "It's similar technology to our jump drives, but weaponized." Admiral Chen cut in. "The technical details are classified. What matters is that we have a potential weapon against the Harbingers, but we need to test it in actual combat conditions." "Which brings us to our immediate concern," Captain Rice added. "According to our projections, the Harbingers will reach the Vela system within 8 hours. We're deploying a battle group to intercept." 8 hours later, the Concordat leadership watched in stunned silence as the human battle group engaged the Void Harbingers at Vela. The feed came from specialized human stealth drones, providing crystal-clear imagery of the confrontation. The Harbingers were visible now, not as ships or creatures, but as vast stretches of absolute darkness that consumed everything in their path. Stars winked out as they approached. Reality itself seemed to fray at their edges. Void anchors in position. A calm human voice reported over the tactical channel. "Establishing containment field in 3, 2, 1. 12 specialized human vessels moved into formation and activated massive generators. A shimmering energy field appeared between them, creating a barrier between the Harbingers and the rest of the system. "Containment established," the voice confirmed. "Harbingers are responding." The darkness seemed to surge against the barrier, testing it. Ilara held her breath. Barrier holding at 87%. Deploying Event Horizon. The spherical vessel moved forward, positioning itself just behind the barrier. False vacuum initiator charging. All vessels pull back to minimum safe distance. The human vessels retreated with precise coordination, leaving only the Event Horizon facing the consuming darkness. Initiator at full charge. Barrier will drop on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The shimmering barrier vanished. The darkness surged forward, engulfing the Event Horizon. Initiator activated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a blinding flash of light emanated from within the darkness. The Void Harbingers seemed to recoil. Their perfect blackness suddenly shot through with streams of brilliant energy. "It's working," Dr. Winters exclaimed, her professional demeanor cracking with excitement. "They can't process the altered physical constants." The darkness writhed, seeming almost to scream in dimensions beyond normal perception. Then, shockingly, it began to retreat. "They're pulling back," Admiral Chen observed. "Fascinating. They can recognize threat." "All vessels, pursue and maintain pressure," Captain Rice ordered. "Don't let them regroup." The human battle group advanced methodically, herding the retreating darkness away from inhabited systems. For the first time since the Harbingers appeared, they were in retreat. The Concordat representatives watched in stunned silence. Then, Chancellor Zilnak spoke, their voice thick with emotion. "They actually did it. They hurt the unhurtable. They fought the unfightable." "This is just the beginning," Admiral Chen cautioned. "We've proven the concept, but the Harbingers are still out there, and they've split into multiple groups. We've won a skirmish, not the war." For 3 straight weeks, the human fleets engaged the Void Harbingers across 17 systems. Each battle refined their tactics. Each encounter provided more data. The humans fought with a combination of cold precision and adaptability that left the Concordat observers in awe. Then came the Battle of Meridian Prime. The Harbingers, displaying a strategic intelligence no one had expected, combined into a massive force and struck directly at the heart of Concordat space, Meridian Prime, home to over 30 billion citizens. All available vessels converge on Meridian Prime. Admiral Chen ordered as alarms blared throughout the station. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. They can't reach us in time, Security Commissioner Drelb said, panic evident in his voice. Our people. Apocalypse actual to Meridian Station. Captain Rice's voice came through. We're in position and engaging the enemy. Evacuation protocols are in effect. The display showed the UEDF Apocalypse and its escort vessels positioned between the approaching darkness and the populated worlds of Meridian Prime. They were outnumbered 10-1. Captain, you can't hold that line, Admiral Chen said, his voice tight. Fall back to secondary position and wait for reinforcements. Negative, Admiral, Rice replied calmly. If we fall back, we lose the outer colonies. Apocalypse will hold. What followed was a battle unlike anything the Concordat had ever witnessed. The human vessels fought with desperate ferocity, sacrificing themselves to buy time for the evacuations. The Apocalypse stood at the center, its weapons tearing holes in the fabric of the Void Harbingers. 3 hours into the battle, the Apocalypse was the only human vessel still fighting. Captain, status report, Admiral Chen demanded. Hull integrity at 23%. Rise responded, her voice steady despite the chaos visible behind her. Weapons at 47%. Life support failing. But we're still in the fight. Reinforcements are 30 minutes out, Chen said. You need to withdraw. Negative, Rise replied. We still have one option left. She looked directly at the camera. Initiating Samson Protocol. Admiral Chen's face drained of color. Captain, that protocol is not authorized except as an absolute last resort. This qualifies, Admiral. Rise offered a tight smile. It's been an honor. Apocalypse out. The transmission cut. Admiral Chen turned to his staff. Get me a direct line to Earth Command. Now. What is happening? Ilara asked, sensing the sudden tension among the humans. Samson Protocol, Dr. Winters explained quietly. It's named after a human mythological figure who brought down a temple on himself and his enemies. Captain Rice is going to convert the Apocalypse's entire mass directly into energy within a false vacuum bubble. The explosion, Ilara began. Won't be an explosion as you understand it, Winters interrupted. It will be a momentary localized rearrangement of fundamental physical constants. Anything caught within that bubble will simply stop being. On the display, the Apocalypse drove straight into the heart of the Void Harbingers. May your ancestors welcome you home, Captain, Admiral Chen said softly. A blinding light filled the display. Then nothing. Where the Harbingers had been, where the Apocalypse had been, there was simply empty space. Sensors detect no trace of Void Harbinger presence, a technician reported after several moments of silence. They're gone. All of them. 3 days later, Ilara stood before the combined leadership of the Galactic Concordat and the human delegation. The grand chamber was subdued, the normal buzz of conversation replaced by a respectful hush. The sacrifice of Captain Rice and the crew of the Apocalypse will not be forgotten, High Chancellor Zilmax declared. They gave their lives not just for humanity, but for all sentient life in our galaxy. Admiral Chen nodded gravely. Captain Rice understood the meaning of duty, as do all who serve. Ilara stepped forward. For 12,000 years, the Concordat has prided itself on peace. We saw violence as a failure of reason, warfare as a relic of primitive times. She paused, looking at the assembled representatives. We were wrong. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Not wrong to value peace, she clarified, but wrong to forget that peace must sometimes be defended. Wrong to quarantine humanity for possessing the very qualities that would one day save us all. She turned to Admiral Chen. On behalf of the Galactic Concordat, I formally request the permanent end of the human quarantine and offer full membership in our community of species. Chen's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Ambassador, that is a political decision beyond my authority, but I will convey your request to Earth Command. Later, as the human delegation prepared to depart, Ilara found Dr. Winters on an observation deck, staring out at the stars. Will they accept? Ilara asked without preamble. Winters turned, a small smile on her face. Probably. Humans are paradoxical creatures, Ambassador. We create weapons that can destroy worlds, then use them to save worlds instead. We quarrel amongst ourselves constantly, yet unite instantly against external threats. We are capable of both boundless cruelty and boundless compassion. She looked back at the stars. But most of all, we're curious. And there's a whole galaxy out there we haven't explored yet. Ilara followed her gaze. The Concordat fears what humanity might become if unleashed among the stars. You should, Winters said simply. But you should also consider what humanity has already proven itself to be. The species that looked extinction in the face and said, "Not today." As the human vessels departed Meridian Station the following day, Ilara watched them go with mixed emotions. Terrible and wonderful, dangerous and necessary. Humanity was all these things. But as the last ship disappeared in a flash of impossible physics, Ilara knew one thing with certainty. The galaxy would never be the same again.